I do not know why it is that Chris Cody has returned. I wanted him speed walking, and I insist that he be speed walking. So just explain to the audience here, Chris, because for some reason you think yourself an accomplished speed walker. You were watching the Olympic event. You were telling us that it's not that hard to do, that you just sort of jog with your upper body and walk with your lower body, and you think you can be an Olympic speed walker of some sort.
You get the hips cooking. And yeah, Dan, it's something I did back in high school when they had to run a mile. I'd be like, I'm not running. I'll do the speed walk. And I did it faster than most people running. So it's something I've done many a time.
All right, so go outside and you can do this.
And I'm still tired from doing it last segment.
Well, that's fine. As punishment for the flying carcasses, 12 minutes of it, and then you can return next segment. I want you doing it throughout the Jemele Hill segment. I want it as a picture-in-picture in the lower half of our screen as we talk to Jemele about important journalistic and societal things. Jemele, thank you for making the time for us. I desperately want to find the funny in yesterday, but it's just it's hard to do. So let's just start. You were not at the NABJ convention. I assume you're a member of NABJ. You didn't think it was a good idea for them to do this, or after having seen what it's become, do you think it's a better idea because of how he embarrassed himself? I didn't think NABJ embarrassed itself.
Can I just say the speed walking is exquisite? Because I'm looking at his form. I'm like, not bad. not bad at all. I mean, he's a little shaky around in that love seat, but that's okay. Yes, I am a member of NABJ. I've been a member since 1992. I actually joined when I was in high school. So I've been with this organization a long time. I was their Journalist of the Year in 2018. And I have to say, I'll be totally candid, Dan. Initially, I was torn about whether or not this was a good or a bad idea. And the reason I was torn about it was because on one hand, I certainly understand all the concerns. Like you don't want to platform people who lie as easily, as Donald Trump does. I mean, he lies like most of us take in air, but he's also running for president and he's the Republican nominee. And in a couple months, he could be president. So I wondered if there was some level of journalistic responsibility to show people exactly who he is. Because one thing I've discussed with a lot of my friends in journalism, a lot of us tend to hang out with each other. We're into politics. We're up on what's happening. We're highly informed about everything. We assume everybody else is too. And that's not to suggest at this point people haven't heard of Donald Trump. They've heard of him. A lot of them know how he is. But there's also a swath of people who have never seen it, right? And it's kind of like, this is probably it's not the greatest analogy, but I'm going to go ahead and go with it anyway. It's kind of like when we started having very serious conversations about domestic violence. A lot of people know that domestic violence was a huge problem in our society, but until they saw what it looked like on video, and certainly now that we're a video-centered society, did they not get the seriousness of what was happening? So I wondered if there was some responsibility as journalists, like, no, you don't normalize the nonsense, but at the same time, you have to show people this is the nonsense so that they fully understand what's at stake in the election. But so I was a little torn about it. But as the details came out, and as it was clear that, frankly, NABJ leadership completely failed, they weren't transparent with their membership. And on top of that, to find out that when it came to Vice President Kamala Harris, that they weren't accommodating. Today is the funeral of Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, who is somebody who's very well known, very much has been a beacon for the Black community. And a lot of dignitaries are attending her funeral, which is why Kamala Harris could not be there in person, but she offered to do a Q&A virtually. And for NABJ to turn her down in this particular election year, I thought it made them look very poorly. And of course, I heard a lot of reports and just talking to people, like Fox News has been a major contributor, financial contributor at NABJ at this year's convention. I know they have in past conventions, but certainly they have been a significant one for this year. So you start adding up 1 + 1 = 2. Then on top of that, you have, the fact that Donald Trump was allowed to pick somebody to be on this panel that we saw yesterday. my thinking is when somebody like him who has no credibility in the Black community at all, despite all these numerous terrible media stories about him gaining support, he doesn't have that kind of support in the Black community. And certainly what he said about Black journalists and Black people in general, he doesn't deserve any. Somebody like that does not deserve to call their own shots at the largest minority journalist convention in the country, and for NABJ to be the largest minority journalism organization. So he doesn't deserve that. But I did wonder about, like, should we do something in terms of showing people exactly what this man is about? But seeing how that interview unfolded and everything that's come out since, this was not a win for Donald Trump. This was not a win for Donald Trump, but this was a much bigger loss for NABJ, given how everything unfolded, and certainly with how the membership feels about what they did. Because Donald Trump will be long gone. He may not even be president, but your membership, the soul of your organization, they're going to be there. And that's who you should heed and take listen to. And a vast majority of the membership was against this even happening.
Do you believe the NABJ membership will vote out leadership come election time?
I do. I mean, I don't think this is something that is going away. I mean, there were numerous calls by the membership for the current leadership to step down. The president of NABJ, Ken Lemon, the executive director, like a lot of people thought that it was that the only way this can somehow be rectified is if they lose their position in NABJ. And I can't say I blame them for feeling that way. And look, I realize that a lot of people are talking about that interview. And if the idea was to get, for lack of a better word, clickbait for the convention to be talked about, they certainly achieved that. But to lose the respect of your membership as leaders, that is the worst thing that could possibly happen. And it compromises your ability to lead going forward.
Let me ask you, in the diminished state of journalism, Jemele, at least diminished, at least in part, because he personally has taken a hatchet to it by just saying fake news and rallying the American people around that as a platform. Doesn't it pass for journalism what they tried to do? Like the execution of what they attempted, coming out of the gate with facts, asking him difficult questions. I thought journalism in its diluted state was done, and people were shown in the light how Donald Trump reacts to questioning that's difficult, and also saw his disdain about being questioned by Black women particularly.
Well, that's why I said it wasn't a win for him at all. And, the thing is, it's one thing when you show clips of Donald Trump at one of his rallies, and he didn't sound any different at NABJ than he sounds on a daily basis. The difference is the crowd, and the difference is the type of questions being asked. At a rally, he's just able to just go and riff and go unfiltered, and you got people cheering. And while if you pay attention to what he's saying, it's certainly horrendous. But I think it's different based off the environment and the setting. And to your point, Dan, in this setting, being questioned by Black women, many of which he has insulted, hello, me being one, right? And also April Ryan, who is a Black political journalist, also a former journalist of the year, just like me, Abby Phillip, Yamiche Alcindor. Like, there's a long list of Black women journalists that he has said very insulting things about. And I did find it valuable that the very first question he was asked at the gate was to account for that, account for what he said about Black people in general. And it was a simple question, a legitimate question, to your point about was journalism actually being done? And to which I say yes, which was, you want Black people to trust you to be leader of this country when you have denigrated the community, you have denigrated some of the most prominent members of the community, and generally talk to Black people with such a low disdain. Why the hell would we want you as leader? Like, sell us on why we should ever think that somebody like you is fit to lead not just America, but our community in particular that is facing very specific, very real, disproportionate problems. And you see how he reacted, which is, again, normal for him. But I think for a lot of people who were watching, I think they were jarred. And at least from what I heard back from people who were there, even the journalists who have seen this song and dance before, but never been in the room when it's happened, even they were jarred by seeing just what a buffoon this man is, and how even in that setting, he didn't even have the common sense and the decorum to tone down how he normally talks. I'm glad he didn't, because he is who he is, and we can't say he's misled anybody in any sense. He has shown exactly who he is. And if people can't see the difference between these two candidates, I don't know what to tell you, but that was certainly on display yesterday. I mean, there was, even though, Dan, you said at the beginning, it's hard to find some humor in it, but there were just some moments where, you know, you almost did have to chuckle in amusement, like, this is a show. What is going on?
Chris Cody, you're going to need to keep it moving. You're not doing the punishment correctly. Your form has gone to hell. Roy, what do you have for Jemele?
Jemele, how would you judge the performance of the panelists?
You know, I thought overall they did a okay job, and people have to remember too that he was apparently pulled early, and probably because his team saw the direction, felt the direction this was going, and it was not going well in any regard. You know, as I said a few moments ago, I had some serious questions about Harris Faulkner being part of the panel, because she's a very Trump-friendly journalist. And, you know, just her network in general, we know how they treated Trump. And part of the reason why he's in this position is because, but I thought there were a lot more important questions that certainly could have been asked. But I'll give Rachel Scott in particular, I believe that's her name, and I apologize if that's wrong.
It is.
The
Yes, it
okay,
is.
the ABC news correspondent. I thought she was excellent. Like, placed in a difficult position with a man that is insulting you right there in your face.
Impossible spot.
Impossible. But I thought she really handled herself extremely well. But a lot of the questions that people wanted him to account for, I thought were generally asked. And the other young lady, I thought she did a good job, particularly in bringing up Sonia Massey and her unfortunate murder.
Let's play the sound for Jemele that I believe is the most seismic of the sound to come from the entire thing. I was surprised by how casually flippant this particular thing was said.
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She is always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be
I mean, Dan, do you know how racist you have to be to sit there in the company of thousands of black journalists as a white man and tell black people who deserves to get called black? Now, that's what he's saying publicly. What do you think his conversations about Kamala Harris or any black people, not named Ben Carson probably, are like in private? And that, again, to your point earlier, I think if there's value, and I put air quotes around value in what happened, is so that people can see, again, this is who you're dealing with. This is who you are saying deserves the mantle of being the president of this country. And it's so funny though, Dan, because he positioned that as if there was some advantage to her telling people that, like, that she's black. And by the way, Kamala Harris, just so everybody knows, has always claimed to be black. She's claimed both her black heritage and her Indian heritage. The woman went to Howard, and she's an AKA. She wasn't trying to hide and run from being black, all right? Those are two of the blackest things you could ever do. Be an AKA and go to Howard, all right? If she wanted to avoid this whole black thing, she ain't going to Howard, all right?
It's a poor job of hiding.
You know what I'm saying? I'm just like, nah, she wouldn't be there if she was trying to distance herself from that part of her lineage. And what's hilarious is him trying to position this as if her blackness became like some calling card for her to be able to rise politically or even to be in the position that she's in. And it's just part of the overall mentality that him and people like him are trying to sell to the American people, is that, black people have all these advantages and look at them, they're using it politically. I'm like, there's never been a black woman who's been in her position politically. She's the first Black woman to be vice president. If it was such a advantage as Donald Trump is trying to sell people on, why haven't there been a litany of Black women who have been vice president? Or why hasn't there already been a Black woman who is president of the United States? So clearly it is not the advantage that he would like to sell. But you can already see what his agenda is, what his strategy is that he is going to, him and his surrogates, and even his vice president, who, by the way, that was a funny part. Every time they brought up JD Vance, you would have thought that Donald Trump had never met that man. I was like, he just picked him for VP. He was like, oh no. His entire attitude was like, oh, I don't know him like that. Like, oh no, I don't feel the way he does. I was like, JD Vance is somewhere like, I mean, come on, man, you just picked me for vice president, and I wonder how he feels being married to an Indian woman. Yes, this is the person that you've attached yourself to. So it just kind of shows you again, just a clown, and the level of racism that he is so easily sinks to is why I don't know anyone would ever doubt what his real integrity and what his character, what it stands for. I mean, the entire time, this is supposed to be, if you're gaining that support among Black people, this is supposed that you claim to be gaining. This was supposed to be your time to give them a message about what you have to offer them as their president. And the only thing he could offer them is racism and bigotry, because he spent so much time in that conversation making sure that he told Black people that migrants and undocumented workers were stealing their jobs. And again, funny but not funny, when he suggested that migrants were crossing the borders to steal journalism jobs, I was like, oh, this is a new one. I did not realize that the people crossing the border were sitting up here trying to be journalists, that they're trying to take our jobs. And so when he was asked about a Black job, and he was like, any job, I was like, oh, so they're coming over here because they're trying to work for a local newspaper and get paid maybe $40,000 a year. Okay, that's the job they're signing up for. That's what they're running to the border for, is to become journalists. Like it was really at times I was watching Dan, and as many rallies as I've seen, I just could not believe that this was somebody who actually is running for president and has a chance of winning it. I keep reminding myself, and I remind other people, remember, it's Joe Biden that was forced out of the race for being unfit, not Donald Trump.
Well, one, in this country's history, there have been examples of when Black people became politicians, white people came in and burned down cities. And two, they said Kamala hates Jewish people. I guess they haven't really checked out who her husband is.
I would say, did they not check? Did they not know about the second gentleman? Okay.
Jemele,
yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that like we've gotten to this point in the political discourse. But I'm hoping that this election will be another referendum on what we don't want. Because the last 3 elections, we've literally had to fight for the soul of this country. And this is another one where it's being challenged and tested. And it's just certain things that just as Americans that we should say, no, we're not standing for that. And Donald Trump is that person. Like, this has got to be something that everybody has to be united about. Like, we can tolerate, we can have a lot of things, and there's a lot of problems in this country for sure. Can't have that. That's not helping.
She's a Meadowlark advisor. You can find her on YouTube at It's Jemele Hill. Jemele, good catching up with you. You'll be happy to know that this segment went so long, Jemele, that I heard through the walls Chris Cody yell, "Oh, for the love of God!" because he's getting very tired out there. I
see that he stopped. Like, what?
Yeah, unacceptable.
How are you supposed to? That is very unacceptable. Where's your competitive instinct, Chris? Man, this is sad, man. That's pathetic.
It is pathetic. Thank you, Jemele.
All right. Take care.